Yeah. Okay, I'll make sure they don't do that. God, you are the ultimate parent. We are reminded in the story of the prodigal son that you are the compassionate father, mother to all of us. Pray that you inspire us in this time, today and always. Amen. All right. Hey everyone. So I'm titling this The Parents, the Secret Sauce to Faith Formation, but you can call it whatever you want. And so most of this book is, hey Jamal, I already broke it. Oh, guys, I'm so excited. All right, I'll just do that. Thank you. So, I have been interested significantly in the role of parents in faith formation for a lot of reasons. Mostly because, wait, I need to go back. Because we're in a new season, right? There's a new season of church attendance. We're renegotiating the role of church in society, where it fits for all of us. And families, that transition, that negotiation is happening a lot. So in seminary about a decade ago, there would be people who were lamenting like, oh, there's soccer, there's lacrosse, people don't prioritize church the way they used to, and they're sort of like bad-mouthing families living a full life, which not a great idea, especially for seminarians who are going to be ministers to families. And so, but there is a, church has moved, and hey bud, you can keep running as much as you want, and we're just gonna like love it, and it's gonna be great. Can I get it? Yep, you're a good mom. And so we're negotiating, right? Like, what's the role of church? What's the role of parents in faith formation? But here's the thing. We all want our kids to ultimately have the same thing, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity as a child of God. We want our kids to have resources and build resiliency when times get rough. We want them to trust in something bigger than themselves and be part of something bigger than themselves. And we want that more than we want to boost our numbers. We want the faith thing to be grounding and exciting and life-giving to them. And so, how do we do that? Well, if they're not in church, and even when they were in church, they were only in church for like 1 or 2 hours a week. But parents get to be with their kids all the time, even more than you'd want to be with them sometimes. And so it's always been true that parents are the place where faith formation happens. And then, luckily, some researchers took it very seriously. So this handy-dandy book, Handing Down the Faith, How Parents Pass Their Religion On to the Next Generation, it just came out this year, or 2021, so within the year. And they looked at the question of the role of parents in faith formation super academically. So this is a very academically rigorous book, so don't just pick it up if you just want to like, here's the research. This is how they conducted it. During 2014 and 2015, researchers Christian Smith and Amy Adamczyk, does that sound about right? Led a national sociological study of American religious parents, religious across the board. They and their team conducted 215 in-depth interviews with parents who belonged to churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples, encompassing white conservative Protestant, mainline Protestant, black Protestant, white Catholic, Latina Catholic, conservative Jew, Mormon, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist. So it was wide-ranging, not just particular to Christians. And then they had an additional sample of 20 non-religious parents as a control group. And it's interesting to watch a study where it's like, they didn't really have a particular angle. They weren't trying to get kids to believe anything. They're just like, we're just studying parents who pass on the faith. And they found, no surprise, that all the research shows that parents are by far the most important factor influencing their children's religion, not only as youth, but also after they leave home. Not clergy. I'm off the hook, guys. Religious schools, not youth ministers, not neighborhoods, not Sunday school mission trips. They listed the whole thing. None of that matters as much to faith formation as parents do. And many parents don't realize that this is the case, and neither do their children. That's the interesting part. Nobody knows that this is happening. So the kids see themselves as autonomous information processors making independent, self-directing decisions. It's this great game. We're all like doing this thing where parents are exerting so much influence, and the kids think that they're like, no. I love that. So, parents, grandparents, concerned parishioners, how does it feel to hear that parents play the biggest role in faith formation? How does it feel to hear this? I hear ka-ching, ka-ching, tell me more. Can you stand up in the mic so that those online can also hear? Ooh, is it even on? Oh, now it is.
Okay. I'm just glad to know that the effort is worthwhile.
Bingo. Your efforts are validated. Thank you. That is beautiful. Yes, all of you here, all of you there, your efforts have not been in vain, even if they feel like they have been. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being present. Thank you for caring. I want you to linger a little bit in the land of the feels. And you don't have to name it out loud, but the emotional part of this is just as important as the mind part of it. So thank you for lingering. The researchers not only discovered that parents play the biggest role, they also uncovered, which is helpful, the two most effective components of transmitting faith from one generation to the next. Do I have anybody who wants to guess what they are? What would you think? Showing up. Like, what do you mean by that? Like coming to church? The habit. The habit, and then, just building it into daily living. Building it into daily living. Yeah.
I would say acts of service.
Acts.
Seeing you or being included in serving, community service, etc.
Acts of service. Your kids getting to like watch you walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Acts of service.
And that was like a voice of God. I like it. Hey, Andrew, you want to be my Vanna White? We can do this. Okay, great. Thank you. Hal. Wait, Vanna's coming. I like love this joke too much.
Just in general, practicing the values you preach.
Practicing the values you preach. All right. Without any further ado, talking. Talking. The biggest takeaway is the parents who talk about their faith, their wrestles, why faith is important in their ordinary life. Just keep, like, it was just like parents who talked about faith in the ordinary life. That was a big takeaway. The other big takeaway was parenting style. And this part is a little bit more like sensitive, I guess. So they did research between like their permissive, non-engaged. They had 4 types of parenting style that they looked at or that they named. Non-engaged, so parents who are like completely disengaged from their kids. Permissive, so parents who were like, everything goes. Authoritative, parents who were always like, because I said so, and that's why my way the highway. And what they called authoritarian, which I think they need to, authoritative, which I think they need to rename because it sounds a lot like authoritarian. But authoritative, meaning that you talk to your kids, you set expectations for them. They said high expectations, which I guess that seems like a loaded thing. I don't know what they mean by high, and so and in our highly motivated culture around here in DC, I want to like take a step back a little bit and think about whether we want such insane high expectations of our kids, like when is good enough actually good? But parents who do set high expectations and who have built warmth and communication in their home. So parents who are super communicative, over-communicate, and be super warm and gushy and like very generous with the hugs. And so those kinds of things, parenting style, having expectations, and talking to your kids, and then your kids start to take you seriously. They take you seriously, and they take your faith seriously. Now, why is it that parents have this much influence? Time. Parents spend the most time with their children. We talked about that, but there's the myth of teenage rebellion that we all hang on to. It's really big in our cultural imagination, especially for us who are not Gen Zers or iGens. So in the mid-20th century, the motto was accepted, Sturm und Drang. I don't know how to, from writings of Anna Freud and others, early 20th century writers, that adolescence is inevitably a time of rebellion. But the reality today is far different. And the stereotype of an adolescent generation gap is baseless, mostly. Most youth today have entirely bought into adult values and goals. The vast majority of teenagers and parents today get along reasonably well, and most teenagers still look primarily to parents for guidance and help in life. Which I feel like, I'm getting some nods, like I feel like this is your experience, right? Your kids are like, you know what, okay, Mo, I get Yeah, shifting perspective to find that reality. Well, kudos to you. But this is just saying what you all generally know. Is like, it's not like Animal House, right? It's not like kids are sneaking out of your house all the time. They know how to. They want to make good choices. Especially around here. Okay. In general, this is like the whole study. Yes, and so your kids are less fighting you than the culture would have us believe. And so what to do with all of that influence? The researchers found that parents regularly talking to their children about religious matters during the week had a powerful association with the children growing up to be religiously committed and involved. People usually talk about what they care about, whether it be sports, politics, music, or romantic relationship. When all parents say about religion to children during the week is something like, okay, everyone, leaving for church in 30 minutes, that is telling. The research also discovered that some religious parents are more effective at passing on their faith than others. This will not be surprising probably to most of you Mormon, Black Protestant, and conservative Protestant parents are relatively more successful, measured as children's greater importance of faith and religious service attendance in their later 20s, while mainline Protestant, which is us, Catholic and Jewish parents fare significantly less well. All right, just a show of hands. How many people are surprised by this? Yeah, no. So I got no hands. Nobody's surprised that we are not as effective at passing on the faith as some of our other religious siblings in America. And if you're anything like me, you're a little bit bummed about this because, especially in our country, there is a need for the ways in which we practice faith to be embraced and to celebrated, a way to embrace faith and science at the same time, where there's all these things, right? And I know you know that. And this is like one of those questions where I was getting insecure. I was like, man, people are gonna be like, well, what if because my experience is that in talking to mainline parents, there has been a deep respect. They have bought into that line too, that they are not trying to form their kids' faith in any significant way. They just want to present options and say, now you choose. They also have that, they believe like kids that their kids are autonomous, processing their faith, who are gonna make their own independent decisions. And really, which is this beautiful thing, they wanna respect that autonomy. What I would push back on is, but we all need teachers, and we all need guidance, and we all need people to help us. And more than, the question isn't, can you get your kids to believe that, and the way we think of believe this day, post-Enlightenment, that there is empirical evidence that the Nicene Creed is correct. That's a simplistic, basic understanding of faith that actually this is about so much more than that. Faith questions are like, what are you spending and being spent for? What commands and receives your best time, your best energy? What causes, dreams, goals, or institutions are you pouring out your life for? As you live your life, what power or powers do you fear or dread? What power or powers do you rely on and trust? To what or whom are you committed in life and death? What are those most sacred hopes, those most compelling goals and purposes in your life? And these are all faith questions from James Fowler, who wrote this book, Stages of Faith, which is amazing. And so to be someone who cares actively about the forming of your kids' faith is to be someone who cares about how your kids can have the tools to answer these questions. And these are the ultimate questions, which I don't even think a lot of adults get time to think about. But if you're talking about faith, if you're talking about religion, if you're talking about where God fits in your life at home, then these questions are automatically, you start to get some legs about how you answer these questions. The other reason they hypothesize that talking is so important is because religion is like a second language. Learning to believe and practice a religion requires essentially learning a second language, and that always requires practice talking. Now, I invite you to think about the past week or the past couple months. Have you had any opportunities to talk about your faith? Or have you had any missed opportunities now that you're thinking about it?
Perpetuated. And so
And so I suppose my contribution to this is, it's important to be honest when we share our faith. In our house, we share our faith and our doubts. So there's a lot of discussion sometimes at dinner table, just like there is in politics or any other issues, where we'll disagree with each other and we'll have, fiery, discussions about things, including aspects of faith and religion. And sometimes I worry that turns our kids away, or we pass on our doubts rather than a strong faith. But in fact, I think it passes on critical thinking, to be honest about the processes and what we struggle with.
Yeah.
But with an undergirding faith.
Yeah. Yeah, so not being afraid to model on just like, oh, perfect, like, oh, I have it all figured out, but being able to be honest with the wrestling with your kids. Thank you for that. I think a term that Miroslav Volf talks about is like thin religion versus thick religion, which gets to what you're talking about, good religion versus bad religion. I saw your hand right there.
We come from a part of the country that is the buckle of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Say is a fair way to say it. So a lot of times I think our biggest mistake, my biggest mistake with our college student, our high school student, is that the conversations revolve around doing things because you're a good person or because this is what we believe love is, rather than framing it in a religious context. And so I would say that would be my largest miss as a parent in terms of having these conversations. We have the conversations. I don't frame them in terms of being Episcopalian or in terms of my belief in God or whatever it is. I also am a little gun shy, being from an area where several of the religions that you talked about that pass their faith on, their belief structure, I wouldn't say faith, their belief structure on. I'm on a college campus, and what they do is a phenomenal job. I don't know as much about Black Christian faiths, but the Mormon and the conservative Protestants, they do a phenomenal job of maintaining their children's connection through networking. And so those kids come to campus and they as young adults, they don't ever waver. And that's something that I think as our religion, we have a great person on campus, but she's picking up the pieces from other people rather than always bringing the Episcopalian kids along. Does that make sense?
That makes a whole lot of sense. Like, we have ceded the territory, we have ceded the cross, we have ceded Jesus, because the people who talk about the cross and the people who talk about Jesus are just like, we don't want to be them. That's real. Yeah, wow.
So I wanted to answer your question. Think about the past week or the past month, any opportunities to talk about faith. So in the context of how you interact with other people, I've substitute taught a couple of days last week. And one of my former students, I saw her, she's a Ukrainian by ethnicity and speaks the language and all that. And I had thought about her several times, obviously. And so without being too intrusive, I just, oh, it's so good to see you and all that, and try to show her my concern for her as a teacher to a student, and say, I thought about you and I've said a few prayers for you and your family, and just let it go at that. So I think it helps these young people if they have somebody who is a teacher or somebody that they respect, and to know that that person has faith in their life. I think that will give them permission in some way to do it in their life. And it has no reflection at all on this young lady. It's just a general statement.
Thanks, Bob.
So I have a question which relates to what was said earlier, which is their factor that they used at success, which was having children who were in their late 20s and were still attending services. So I question whether that's the indicator of success. especially for mainline, right? I mean, that's a normal time when people may be drifting from the church, but still in their lives, do they have faith? Are they acting on it? And then maybe do they come back and teaching it to their own children? And so that seems like the indicator.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, and I honestly can get back to you with more of the details. They did not just measure church attendance as the sign of a marker of effective faith, but asked the kids to self-report in a survey about how important faith is to their own lives. So it wasn't just the markers. But thank you for asking that question. Yeah, Hal.
It seems to me,
One second. You're doing
it seems
great.
to me in the effective communication with kids about values and religion that it would be part of being effective would be getting kids involved in asking questions of their own and expressing their own thoughts and getting them actively involved in the dialogue rather than just being preached to.
Thank you, Hal. That is an excellent part of the research, which is it is super effective when and that's a part of being the kind of parenting style that they talk about, where you respond a lot to the kids and the kids' own questioning, and you look for opportunities rather than just pontificating throughout the week, which is your point, which is a turn off, which veers toward the authoritarian style of parenting, to being actively engaged in the back and forth. So thank you. Yes.
Do you need to keep going, or can we just keep talking?
You can keep talking.
So, and I'm Charlotte. My kids are 16 and 19. Kind of dovetailing with this, we do talk about, maybe we don't do enough to talk about where God fits in our life, but I think adding to that, it's where the community of faith fits in your life. So I've tried to emphasize that your questions are needed in this community. Your voice of doubt or wonder is needed in this community and accepted in this community, and that this community is where some of these important questions on that previous slide that you showed, that this is a community of people who's willing to entertain those questions. The other thing, though, I would say is behavior does reflect values for sure, but some of the behaviors in teenagehood don't always reflect the full state of their values.
100%.
So we can see teenagers behaving rather independently in ways that we may not want as parents. But also that same teenager, sits down with us and talks about how actually questions like, well, why at St. Columba's aren't we serving breakfast to everyone on the street? Why aren't we up at Wisconsin Avenue inviting everyone in to come down and sit with us? And to our church, and doing that. And so I'm like, well, we'll get on that. It's anyway. So it's it's a time of wrestling, I think. And so I think that can look like this rebellion, but it's really wrestling with their own power and place, but that includes their own place, their own relationship to God. And I think forming that,
you're hitting
that aspect of you are becoming that full adult. You've moved from childhood to adulthood, and what's your relationship with the divine, and what are you being called? And
so that question of becoming is huge for this time. So I was just at my computer. Fuller Seminary, which does great research on youth and young adult, as part of their Fuller Youth Institute, had they've distilled the question of adolescence and emerging adulthood into sort of 3 questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? And what is my purpose? Identity, purpose, belonging. And so the reason it can be really hard to be present to people in this life stage is like they don't know the answer to any of those questions. Not who am I, not where I belong, not what's my purpose. And they're trying on all these different personalities, and they're pushing back on all these limits to see like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And churches that take those three questions very seriously for youth and young adults are the ones that are thriving in their emerging adult ministries. So who am I? Where do I belong? And what is my purpose? And so I hit the nail on that one. And you also got to something about like, so what's the role of the faith community there? And I was going to have us do 2 exercises, and you guys can decide which one you want to do. We can do, so like the finding that religion is like a second language, and we need to practice our language skills. So I was going to either have us do some practicing language skills and invite you all to circle up and talk about faith questions, like if your kid asks, why do you pray? What do you say? Or wants to know how religion or faith makes a difference in your work-life balance, or in your home life, or in your work life, whatever. So we could do that. We can do some practicing, or we can sit with Charlotte's question, which is, that's a lot of, the research puts a lot of pressure on parents, and I don't want anyone to feel like, well, go figure it out on your own. Good luck. The church has got no part of this. Like, that would not be great, and that would not be very kind. So we could spend our last 15 minutes sort of brainstorming and troubleshooting what this means for the church. You want to do second option? Okay. Wait, how many people for the second option? Okay. And who wants to practice their language skills? Okay, we'll work on that later. Actually, I would love for you to do this homework, because it's actually, we could do. Wait, can you get Charlotte the mic? Can you start all the way from the beginning?
I think, let's have a follow-up meeting on the first one, because it kind of answers, what does this mean for the church? Well, it means we need more active parent support about how do we have those conversations at your breakfast, at your dinner table like you are, and how do we answer those questions?
Yeah, that sounds
So I'd be interested in that. Who all be interested in that? Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Dana Crapo. I came a little bit late, and I apologize, but I think it means we need to make sure our children at every stage of their development. I'm an elementary public school teacher, and I always think about like a 9-year-old is very different from a 16-year-old and their brain development. But the church, the leaders in the church, those relationships, like if your kid has one person who knows them by name and knows them by what's important to them and asks about them every Sunday, I know that makes a difference for my 9-year-old and for my 11-year-old. Mm-hmm. If they get a fist bump and a, hi, how are you by name? I've been thinking about you, and this thing you mentioned was important to you. Whether or not it's Transformers or, it's the beginning of ability to have a conversation that's deeper and more faithful. So I appreciate the fact that our church leaders and ministers make those relationships with individual kids important, not just the full congregation of worshipers.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, I love that. There's also a lot of kids here. You're the expert, so my understanding is also like, it's important, it's great if there's like a head, but it's also great if any grown-ups also know other kids, ideally 3. And so when the children's renovation team was meeting a couple years ago, part of in our goals is like to foster a community in which each kid and each youth who comes to St. Columba's is known and affirmed by 3 other non-grown-ups, non-family members. And so that could be what this church is, because then taking a little bit of the pressure off of the parental unit, but sharing and knowing and trusting that the other adults got your back, and like, you know their kids, they know your kids, and there's a sense of community. So known by other adults, ideally 3. That does mean go out and start talking to some like young people in non-creepy ways. That would be great, everybody. Learn some names. Let's bring back the name tags. Yeah. My God. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you gotta wait. Andrew can only go so fast, man.
I think it's part of what the renovation team may have been working on, but not treating the children as much like babies with fairy tales for as long as we have historically. That really treating them as folks who are thinking and questioning, wrestling with these things, as we all are.
Respecting kids as thoughtful children of God, yeah. And I do think, thank you, Peter, for naming that, because that feels honest and true, and that feels like a strength that we can build on at St. Columba's. Like, we don't infantilize our people. Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad. No, I didn't want to take the mic away. No. That would backfired.
Sorry, just to follow on from that, there was a report that the Church of England published
Wait, can you put
donkeys years ago, like maybe even 20 years ago, called Children in the Way. Mm-hmm. And it was an intentional double meaning title. Are our children walking in the way of our faith with us, or are we seeing our children as being in the way? Right.
Yeah.
And the churches that tended to see children in the way are the ones that send them out of church for special sessions and Sunday school. And the churches that see their children as being in the way find a way to incorporate the children into the worship of the church in the whole family.
That is an incredible, like, useful metaphor. Are your kids in the way, or are they in the way? Like, ooh. That's got legs. And I'm taking these notes because this will help me. Now it's your time.
We're not members at St. Columba, but one of the things that I noticed, we have a 22-year-old son, and our parenting conversation changed to what's the long game? Like, how do we think about having a relationship with our son as he goes away? And so how did that change our family values? And I also think that's important for the church. So one of the reasons earlier I said it was about habit is that when they're confused and when they don't know what to do, I want him in the long game to be like, oh, okay, I can find an Episcopal church, or I can find a church that speaks to me, or I can find a religion. And so to me, it's part of that long game, like giving them that skill set of where to find somebody to ask the questions to.
So, a not so great example of the long game, this is my own. So I have 2 kids. They're little, they're 4 and 2, and my 4-year-old knows that mommy works in the church and that mommy likes prayer is important. And so that means that when we pray sometimes at night or on the dinner table, he'll start going, la, 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 and he'll just be like, he will have been a dream, but then it's like, we're gonna start praying, and he's just like, you know, I'm like, I cannot believe And then I'm like, you're doing this on purpose. I'm trying to have a quiet moment. I'm trying to get you close to God. I'm trying to have you have an opening to the transcendent encounter, okay? And you ruining this for me. So the other night, so like it's real. So the other night he's doing his thing, and I'm like, Arthur, it is time for us to pray, and we have to be quiet before God. And then so it's like it's done, right? Like he knows he's won. Exactly what he was trying to do has happened. I am angry, which is an incredible model for how to approach prayer. And then I'm like, but I can't just go like, that's it, we're not praying, go to bed, because that's not good, guys. Like, I'm like, oh man, he knows that. He wants me to get to like, we're not praying. But I was like, okay. So instead my prayer was like, God, help me because I'm angry and frustrated. Good night. And I will say, his attitude changed like almost immediately. I didn't force a false prayer of like peace and serenity. I didn't pray inauthentically. And he's 4, and the kid is like genius in terms of how to like rile me up. He knows where all my buttons are. And so it was a Hail Mary pass. It was like, I know we need to pray, but if I pray the traditional prayer of like, God, I pray that Arthur has a good night's rest, that he has good dreams, that he wakes up happy, healthy, and kind, he would have been like, she's just saying it. It doesn't actually make a difference. And so, and it's because like I want him to have a relationship with prayer as an authentic practice. And so what you're talking about is like thinking about that in sort of every single way. Like, what is our long game? And if our long game is a relationship with other people, a community of faith, which is wildly important. You cannot do faith by yourself. It's super contrary to rugged American individualism, but faith is not a personal endeavor. None of the yous in the New Testament are singular. They're all ustedes. They're all plural. So like all those things, just like keeping the long game in mind is huge. So thank you for naming that. We got 5 minutes left. What does it mean for the church?
You mentioned that service wasn't church service. Outreach wasn't something that was part of the long game for these youth. And I'm sort of, can you say more about that?
I can't. I wish I could say more. It didn't show up as not that it doesn't matter, and I think it's not that it doesn't matter to kids, but there are lots of ways to do good work in the world, and so I think the church, because of seeding sort of the cross in God, we have decided, well, like the world always needs people who are going to do good in terms of like Fred Rogers, right? Like look for the helpers. Well, we can be the helpers, and that's the way that we can differentiate ourselves or be true to the gospel. And that's important, but that's not what makes us a church. Like that's not what makes us a church, or that's not what helps with faith formation long term. Because people can do good work anywhere. And since it wasn't particularly Christian or Christocentric, and that was like across the board, like all religious communities. It mattered, but ultimately not for faith.
The question about what do you think this means for the church, seems to me what you're saying is that St. Columba's needs to focus on parenting. And it's not just I've done my job as a father when I can talk to my child about God, but it's about me being a better parent and developing those skills, of which one is to talk about my faith. Mm-hmm. But the skill of being a parent is the critical part, and it's not just dropping my child off to St. Columba's on Sunday morning and get him gassed up and then he'll be okay for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. It's just, it shifts the focus to the parent away from the child.
Totally. And I could hear echoes in what you're saying. Like, then if I'm thinking about the church, well, that means then those of us who are not parents are also then looking out for the parents, right? Like, then like, how does it mean as an organization to to prioritize, not prioritize in a non-hierarchical ways, but to put more energy and emphasis on supporting parents who are in the trenches and like figuring out how they're doing this and doing it together. So thank you. All right, friends, that's time. You were an amazing assistant. Thank you. Happy to talk more about this. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.